Welcome to another edition of the Sawdust City Happy Hour Tastings. Beautiful, warm weather starting to splash across the province right now. Warming up finally is Sam Corbeil, brewmaster and co-founder of Sawdust City Brewing, joins me as always today. You had to take advantage of the back deck, didn't you, Sam? Finally, we get a
Yes,
little bit of sun in our lives.
I earmarked this day on Monday when I saw Tuesday it was still 6 degrees. We're 14 degrees warmer right now. This is balmy.
Yeah,
So
it's
I was
beautiful.
very excited to get back out here and enjoy some sun.
I was very actually jealous. I don't usually say this about the weather in Saskatchewan. When I was talking on Wednesday on our podcast with Derek Taylor, who hosts the breakdown with me here on Canadian Football Perspective, and I said, "Now, what's the weather like for you guys out there? I haven't looked at the grand scheme of the country and how everybody's doing and warming up." He's like, "It's been 20 degrees out here for I don't know, a solid week and a half." I'm like, "What? In the prairies, you're warmer than us?" And the one thing that I'm not jealous of, though, is that he only drinks Pilsner out there in Saskatchewan.
Oh
And
well.
today we have for you a beautiful Sawdust City Bockbier. Tell us what goes into a beautiful Bock as I crack this bad boy open, Sam.
Box are, I mean, it's super warm out right now, so I wouldn't say that Box are perfect warm weather beers, but they're typically released around holidays like Easter. It's a much heavier, maltier beer. A lot of not a lot of hops go into making a Bock. It's all about the malt and the rich, bready, nutty character, a little bit heavier. It's like a meal in a glass. And honestly, like if you had asked me 5 years ago, I never would have told you I'd make a Bock
Really?
because well, it was all about the hops, man, and so was everyone else.
Yeah.
So, but having learned in Germany, it's a very German style of beer. It comes from a city called or an area called Einbeck. It was a very dark lager. It's a very historic type of beer. Uh, and the goat that's on it actually, just through linguistics in different regions in Germany, when they say Einbeck, it comes out Einbach, which means billy goat. So you'll see goats on a lot of Bock beers.
Really?
Uh, and I didn't want to, I mean, a lot of craft breweries really dig into the pun, so I didn't want to make a goat pun, but I I want to do something that was like if I told Sandy about I want to do something. Picture Andy Rooney was a goat. What would that look like? And she just threw this angry goat, and I'm like, and I could see someone say, "You know what really gets my gears?" Like an
Yeah.
old guy, curmudgeon old man. That's what he's doing, and I thought it worked.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I'm somebody who was strange enough as a kid to watch 60 Minutes every single week. So that relates with me where I'm just imagining a dirty desk with a billion pieces of paper on it.
yes,
One eyebrow is significantly higher than the other, leaning over with nose hairs poking out and saying, "Here's what people don't understand about Bock beer." Just
you
starting to
could you could see Andy Rooney as a goat though, right? Like he
absolutely. And the
could
can
be
actually looks
an
like it.
animated goat of Andy Rooney. That was what I was thinking. But I still love this, and that might have been a little too specific of a reference, and unfortunately dated. I mean, he has been dead for quite some time, and I
Yeah.
don't know. You might be one of the few people under 40 that knows who Andy Rooney is.
Well, that's the funny thing is if you say Andy Rooney, anybody watching this right now who's of a certain demographic, they're like, "Sorry, who?" And then they look it up and they're like, "Okay, he's just like some newsman." It's like, no, no, Andy Rooney held a special place in broadcasting and news and people that were your weekend was winding down and you just wanted to hear some old man rant about something that every 10 seconds you would go, "Yeah, yeah, that dude's right. That dude gets it."
Yes, the
It's
the quintessential curmudgeon, and
yes.
I thought that it was great. And well, outside of the fact that it's a goat, the beer itself is super bready, a lot of malt, a lot of
Yeah.
nuts, very rich. And as I started as I get older and I've gone through making all the hoppy beers, and I still love those. You can see the write up on the side. I was being a little bit trying to drum up my own inner Andy Rooney and be the curmudgeon, crusty old guy, uh, and talk about belying all the hops that are out there now and making a really malt forward beer. And I do think people are starting to really get back into what malt can be. We've been so much on this hop train that you have to differentiate yourself some way. And a lot of brewers are getting back to that malt, which is sort of like the soul of a beer. It's like the
Right.
building blocks of when you build a beer. And there's some great malt out there. And this is a chance for us to showcase some of the richer, darker malts that sometimes get forgotten about.
Freudian slip there, by the way, on building Bock, because it is one of the building blocks of all.
I really wish that was on purpose, but it wasn't.
Hey, broadcasting, man, you run with it as soon as you hit it. But I do want to read the back of the can for people because it says, "Gosh darn kids, always with their IPA. Sheesh, in my day, the only thing dry hopped was an unfortunate bullfrog stuck in the sun. Whatever happened to the multi brews they used to make? They were dark, rich, and deeply complex. A beer you could enjoy, sip slow, and take your time on. Dang, things tasted like beer, not like juice, damn it. Well, fiddlesticks. I love that you went fiddlesticks there, by the way, Sam. But they can have their hopsy brews. I'll take this Bock. It tastes like the beer that I remember. It is a fantastic, fun description on the back that kind of fits the beer itself. You mentioned off the top that you never thought you would make it, and because everything was all about hops, and obviously IPAs are a craze, still a craze, all the rest. But how rewarding is it to go back to something like this and kind of tweak it and find what you found beautiful? I'm sure when you were actually learning overseas about what Bockbier was.
Well, it was, we did this with our friends at Brew Culture, and they had this new malt supplier that we were getting introduced to, IREX. So it was like going through the list of the malts and selecting them and thinking about and researching the beer. And sort of, I think when you're making a beer, you sort of have to understand where the beer came from and what it's, the history behind it in order to fully appreciate it. And I was lucky enough to be in Germany and have that opportunity to travel around and try this. So I had some of that background information, but it had been quite some time. And I spent this Christmas going through a lot of the LCBO gift packs that may or may not have had Bocks or maltier beers, and sort of really diving into that style, which, we're lucky to have the LCBO when there are these imports that come in, because we do get them at a very fair price, and we get a lot of some of the world's best beers come into Ontario through the LCBO. So we do have the opportunity to try some. And that was sort of that was exciting to go back and do that research and dive back into the Bock, because it had been a while. And, there was a history in Ontario where these German and British older style of beers really were prevalent. It just, over the last sort of wave of craft beer, that all the new things came and we sort of forgot about where we started out, which was with these traditional beers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the third of 4, by the way, in the lager series that we've been doing for the last month or so here on our happy hour tastings. And the California Common, I really loved. I think personally for me, it was my favorite, although David's Affordable Dortmunder last week with Noel, I still can't get over how smooth it was. It blew me away how smooth that thing was. And like you say, this is almost like a polar opposite. It feels like in the spirit of what we looked at last week, is it not, with the Dave's Affordable Dortmunder, where you're going in something, like you say, it's so much heavier and a meal in a glass, but it's also one of those that, like we talked about with the California Common, the Gravenhurst Steam, where you sit down and it feels like it's a pint. Like you want to just sit there and enjoy it in that same sense. Yeah,
this isn't end of the meal or having after dinner. It's a contemplative beer. It's a much higher alcohol. It's 6.5%, 6.6 actually. And it finishes the finishing gravity, the amount of sugar that's left in it when it's done fermenting is much higher.
Right.
It's 5.5, while the other ones are 3.5. So as a percentage, that's significantly higher. You can feel it. It's a little bit sticky, a little bit richer, and you kind of want to have that fig pudding kind of raisininess to it. And that's sort of you sit there and you're just relaxing with it, as opposed you're not going to have 3 of these in a row. You can, whatever, it's up to you. But I feel it's probably a 1 and I'll have another one tomorrow.
Yeah.
While the other beers, you could probably sit down and have a couple. And, there's different beers for different occasions, and you sort of have to find which ones you want to have once in a while and the ones that you want to have a bunch of it, enjoy all the time.
Yeah, I think I laughed when I heard you, Connor, and Wade discussing about a month ago about your perfect approach to tailgating. This is not one of those that you start with at the tailgate, no. but at the same time, I laugh when I hear you say, you probably don't want to have 3 of these. You can, whatever, if you want to. I forget what the beer was, but it was something craft brew in Western New York. I went to a Bills game and I bought a 6-pack of something that wasn't like this. I mean, this is pretty unique, but it was a heavier IPA style, and what a bad decision. Just so dumb. Just the worst possible. It was the Monday Night Football game with The Bills playing against the Patriots when Tom Brady was still there and Thurman Thomas was being on. It was huge, and it was the first time the Bills had hosted a Monday Night Football game in forever. My girlfriend then at the time, fiance now, bought the tickets for me. We were looking forward to it for months, and we went down there for 1 p.m. for an 8:15 kickoff, and we get
a long tailgate.
Well, I love tailgating, and I was like, I'm for it, but we get there, and you get about 3 of the heavy stuff in you, and you're like, we got 9 hours to go until we're leaving. What am I doing? That didn't make any sense. But at the same time, it's different goals for different beers. And you guys have nailed this one, obviously, if it's something that you just want to enjoy casually on a day like today.
Yeah, and I mean, typically I might have grabbed for something a little bit lighter in the sun, but
right.
Or the first one of the day. But it's still nice to. I really like. I'm glad I haven't had a bunch, so I can. Typically, if I have this at the end of the night, I've had a few beers, so I don't appreciate it as much. So it's nice to have it at the beginning, and sort of like, man, I'm sort of figuring out if I were to do it again, how would I approach it differently, and what I would do to tweak it. Because, like, you know, as a brewer, it's always an evolution. The beers that you make, you start somewhere, you make it, and then the next time you do it, you make it a little bit better, and eventually it comes to where you are super happy with it. And it doesn't always happen right off the bat. It takes some time and some tweaking.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple of questions in here that I wanted to throw your way, Sam. One comes in from Paul, and he says, hey guys, appreciate you doing the weekly happy hour tastings, really enjoying them. Why is it so hard for breweries to nail using maple syrup in beer? Paul says, I have tried 3 or 4 different maple syrup style beers or maple syrup influence beers, and they never end up tasting the way I want with a hint of the maple. They're always overwhelmed. Why is that? And why is it so difficult to work with maple syrup? Have you tried in your experience before?
Well, maple syrup, like the actual, if you were to use real maple syrup, you probably will not taste it in beer.
Yeah.
It is, if you add it at the beginning of fermentation, what happens is the yeast consumes the maple syrup like it's a sugar. So it all goes away. It gets volatiled off and blows away as the yeast ferments it. And I feel this a lot with maple is that I think a lot of people assume maple tastes like fake maple, like the Tim Hortons maple donut. That's not what maple tastes like. Maple tastes completely different than that, but we've now come to know maple as that fake maple flavor. And in order to make people taste it, you have to give them that fake maple taste, which always comes across as fake. And it's hard to put a little bit in because it's a very strong flavor. We've done a few very few maple beers. We actually do one we have a maple trail up here in Muskoka that comes around every April, except obviously not right now. But where we would take, in the past, we've used maple sap as the base water for a beer.
Nice.
And then instead of using fake maple, what I did was I took flavors that you might assume you'd find in maple, like vanilla or oaky or like sort of earthy flavors, to try to evoke the idea of maple as opposed to using fake maple. Because part of the maple trail was that you can't use that fake maple. You have to use real maple. And it's sort of difficult. And we added cinnamon too, because the idea was that it was a maple pancake beer.
Nice.
And so you were trying to evoke the idea of it without using that crutch of fake maple. And it's very difficult to use because unfortunately that's just how it is.
Yeah, if you can't actually use the syrup itself, like you're saying, because of the reaction that it has and just getting eaten up, if you're not using sap as part of the base water, what other ways do you cultivate the syrup flavor? Because it's, for me, you know, I don't know if you have a horror story of trying this stuff and working with the fake maple and just not having it turn out the way you want. But I remember being in university. I love City and Color, Dallas Green, all his music. And so I was in university. I'm playing university football. And I'm wandering through the LCBO. And I think it was Flying Monkey that did a collaboration with City and Color. And it was this super Canadianized beer, maple syrup. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it spoke to me, right? I'm going, yeah, like IPA, high percentage, maple syrup, Canadiana, City and Color. Love those guys. Been to all their concerts. Yes. So I grab it. I end up playing a football game on a Saturday. I'm looking forward to it the whole day. As I'm standing there in the shotgun on the field, I'm thinking, I can't wait to get home to this maple syrup beer. But I end up getting home, cracking it, taking a sip, and not even drinking the rest of it. I think it's the only time in my life that I haven't actually been able to just persevere and try something, because it was that fake tasting. It was that violent on the tongue of just chemical maple syrup. And that's why I found this question so interesting, and I wanted to pull it and ask you, is that it feels like, from what you've said, that there's not a lot of ways to incorporate it, but people always want to have a little bit of that maple syrup vibe when they're doing certain things, whether it be, Canada Day, or they want to have something that's a little bit heavier around maybe Christmas, the holiday season otherwise. But Canadians like using maple syrup a lot of the time as something that signifies what they believe in, and it seems really difficult to try and parse.
It is. And like you could add maple syrup after fermentation, but then you have a bunch of sugar in there and it's really syrupy, and that's not pleasant to drink either.
No.
So it's very difficult. It's along the same lines as honey. Honey, already has a very delicate flavor. So when you add it during fermentation, same things happens. It goes away. And the yeast consumes the sugar, and then you're not left with a lot. So maple syrup is a stronger flavor than honey, but it's the same thing, and it's hard to work with. You can say it's a maple beer, and chances are you're not going to taste very much maple unless you use the fake. So as a rule, we sort of stay away from it. I'd like to learn a bit more, and maybe there are some secrets out there. But now with like the pastry stouts, people are just adding extracts and fake flavors, and that's probably what you're going to end up with.
Yeah, that's interesting. The other question that we got in here comes in from Sharon, who says, which of the 4 of the lager series is your personal favorite?
I'm on Team Steam.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I really like it a lot. I mean, this is the one that I made, but I'm not going to pick my own. And I really, that style, that California Common is a perfect, right in the middle. You get lovely malt. You're able to drink a bunch of it. I think it's a fantastic beer, and I think they really did a great job. So that one's been my favorite so far.
Awesome. That's good stuff. And just so that people know as well, coming up next Thursday, it is May the 20th. I can't believe we're headed towards May 2-4 weekend already, because Ontario is just what Ontario is right now. But on May 20th, you guys are actually hosting a virtual event that, I have to admit, and peeling back the curtain here, we get the beer from Sawdust City, and the most difficult thing for me is not to drink the samples of the stuff that we're going to be, because I love them and I want to try them. And after I end up tasting them, I'm like, well, damn it, I need another Gravenhurst Steam, right? It's like, so I start looking around, and I saw that you guys were doing this virtual event coming up on May 20th, Sam, and I was like, damn, I would love to do that, and split them with my fiance, and we could sit there in front of the computer, have some fun, listen to some music and whatnot. And I was like, I'm out of lagers, man, but it's going to be a great event. It's one of those things that I think we've become accustomed to at this point of doing the virtual events. You take them for granted a little bit, but I mean, that becomes a date night for people if you want, in a time where we can't really do date nights out of the house, right?
Well, it's something new and exciting. You can share together. So, I mean, I guess a date is a shared experience, and This happens to be how we consume our experiences right now. So, and it's the shared experience, and we're actually going to be doing this with our friends at Brew Culture. Dan's going to join us as well, and He's going to talk about the malt and the hops that went into this and the yeast, and sort of talk about it from a supplier side, giving us the whole picture. And then we have Chris from the Toronto Beer Blog. I've known Chris for a long time, and he's got a very unique spin on beer too. So it'll have a good conversation, and it's not just going to be one person. You'll get 3 different perspectives. Chris actually, one time, speaking about Box, he did he gave up food for Lent, and all he did was, for the 40 days, was drink beer. He drank Box for 40 days. He actually did that, and he was on, I can't remember what news station in Toronto covered it while he did it, but he's a big beer fanatic, and it'll be interesting to see his takes on everything. So I'm excited to hear that. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. We'll make sure you get some lagers, and you can join us as well.
Yes, so. Looking forward to it. Again, if you want to check out any of that on social media, it's at Sawdust City Beer, and of course, sawdustcitybeer.com. Sam, go enjoy the sun. Sounds like the kids are running around up there having fun.
The trampoline. Oh yeah, they're out there.
I was gonna say, be safe on the trampoline, kids. Okay, we don't want any of the springs hurting anybody. I was that kid when I was little back in the day. So, but it is a great day to get out and enjoy some beer, and we hope that everybody out there is staying safe, being well. And we're looking forward to having the 4th and final in the lager series coming up next week. Plus, Next week for you here on our Sawdust City Happy Hour tasting, we are going to end up talking about some of the newer releases that are coming out, have a special guest as well. So lots of great stuff coming just around the corner right here on CFP and our partnership with Sawdust City. This is a great one. Congratulations on the creation, Sam. Cheers and appreciate it. Have yourself a great weekend.
Cheers, bud. Have a good weekend.